Alright, so in this video I'm going to pull the pulley off of my power steering pump for my small block Ford. It's on the wrong bracket. To do that I'm using the Astro Pneumatic 7874 pulley puller and installer sets. I've got a 7/16 wrench for first part, 1/2 inch for the next, 13/16 for the nut, and then a 17mm for the stock power steering bolts. There were some additional tools that I used. Instead of the 17mm wrench, I switched over to a 1/2 inch breaker bar with 17mm sockets. Instead of the 1/2 inch wrench, switched over to a 3/8 breaker bar and a 1/2 inch socket. In order to get the installer screw in the middle, I needed to tap out the threads, and that was a 3/8 by 16 tap, and I used my tap, socket, and ratchet. You can of course just use a T-handle if that's all you've got. No problem with that. In order to tap the threads, I used these big channel locks in order to hold on to the pulley shaft, so that while I was tapping it out, the pump itself didn't spin. You should be able to use vice grips or anything else to grip onto there. I used some brake clean in order to clean the body of the pump once I had it off. Not really necessary, you can use any cleaner, not a big deal. I used a little bit of old motor oil, and that was used for the puller body. I just lubed up the threads on the jack screw as they recommend. And what I don't have here on the bench is I used some 8TF and I let that sit just in the cavity here between the puller and the shaft, so to hopefully penetrate and hopefully get a little bit of breakage, but you can use any penetrating fluid just to get in there and let it sit for a day or two. Yeah, so those are... Oh! I also used 1500 grit sandpaper. Once I got the pulley off of the pump, I just used this and cleaned up the shaft a little bit. So those are all the tools that I've used, and you may want to use as well. As you see, grab some used motor oil from the race cars. So it says to lubricate jack screw C with a light coating of oil and screw clockwise into puller body A. So next it says place button, which I'm guessing is this guy right here, into jack screw using a clockwise motion to help O-ring pass internal threads until it is fully seated against the jack screw. So I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to see this, but the O-ring on this is kind of jacked up. It's really bulging out there, which I would not expect. So since I don't want to mess this up, throw a little bit of oil on here before I put it in. It's fully seated in here. Clockwise motion, pushing it down. Get a little bit more light on there. So the O-ring is actually shooting up just on the outside here. Now it's really hard to see that. Yeah, the O-ring is pressed right up. Maybe I don't need the O-ring. I don't really know what it's going to do in there anyways. Yeah, so there's actually a chunk of metal under the O-ring. So you can see there, nothing. As I turn it, chunk of metal. Interesting. No, fits in fine. Oh, that's probably what it's for, just to hold it in so it doesn't pop out like that. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Okay, so we got that. So next thing is place that against the ship and assemble the pulley jaws over pulley body and flange on pulley. Okay, so we have these two little bits here. This side is thicker on the collar. This side's a little bit less thick. So I'm going to put the thicker side to the pulley because, as you can see, this flange here, or this piece of the puller is much wider. So small on top, big on the bottom. Okay. Since that wasn't able to go over, we need to unscrew this. Get that down a bit more. Bring this way down. Okay. So there we have it. Hopefully you can see how that's over both. Let's see. Pull these away. Puller's now recessed into very far. Button's almost all the way in. This sits on here. 1/2 shell, 1/2 shell. Then we're going to screw this down until it's a little tight. Then we're going to put the retainer on top, just like that. And now we get to try and pull this off. Oh, it doesn't look like it's moved at all. I should probably try and soak it down. Maybe heat it up. Shit. Fun, isn't it? Alright, I've had this pulley sitting in a little bit of ATF. Hopefully to get some ATF down in here. I mean, this pulley's been on here for probably longer than I've been alive. I think this came off like an 83. My brother said, so it's been on there a long time. I also stepped up from the 1/2-inch wrench to a 3/8 breaker and a 1/2-inch socket. Maybe that'll give us a little bit more leverage. Seem to be doing too much. Well, let's just keep cranking on her, I guess. There we go. Okay, yeah, after that initial creak, well, it looks like we're getting some separation here. I think we're doing all right. Okay, there we have it. That is how we get the pulley off of the power steering pump. So we can see on the shaft of the power steering pump that there's kind of this, I don't know if it's rust or if it's dirt, but I'm just going to take a little bit of sandpaper and I'll clean that up before I reinstall the pulley on it. So this right here is a 1500 grit sandpaper I'm using. I'm not trying to mar this or like put any deep grooves into this. I just want to clean this up a little bit. all it really took, and that's nice, it's smooth, it's clean, I'm happy with it. So the next thing is, one of the things we need to do is we need to screw a piece into the shaft in order to install a new pulley once I take the pump off of this bracket. So I want to test the threads in here and see if they're any good. If not, I'll run a tap through them. So if we're reinstalling, we're going to have a piece like this. I don't know if it's going to be this one, but it threads into the middle of the shaft. And we can see like this doesn't really start at all. So, and of course shaft turns. Of course it does. Okay, I'll need to grab something just to get a hold on to that. And when I look in here, because this thing is so old and seen so much, I'll try and get a picture, but it doesn't even look like there's threads in there anymore. It's just so rusty and garbagey in there. Bolt is 3/8 16. So we're going to run a 3/8 16 tap into this and see if we can clean those threads up at all. That's starting to thread in, that's not bad. Let's see. So I'm just trying to see if there's a way I can stop the shaft from spinning from inside here. It doesn't look like there is. So I'll probably have to grab a pair of channel locks for that. So big pair of channel locks, give me a bit of leverage. Oh, look how nasty that tap is. Wow. A bunch of gunk in there. Just not surprised. Yeah, you know what? That's not bad at all, actually. You know, as long as those threads don't pull out. Let's see here. I mean, that tapped maybe halfway down, so I actually want to try and thread that tap in a bit more after I clean it up a little bit. The threads actually look pretty nice in there, and they're going not all the way, but they're going down a ways. So that's not bad, I don't think. Okay, let's pull this pump off. Just a 17 mil, which I didn't bring over for some reason. Look at that, breaker bar, just instant. Alright, so next thing I'm going to do is just pull these bolts the rest of the way out, and then I'm going to take this and just brake clean the housing off. Because there's been years of fluid, and as I've been working on it, fluid's been taken all over it, so I'm just going to get it cleaned up a bit. May not have been the best cleanup job in history, but it's good enough. So power steering bracket came with these new bolts. These are ARP, and I might just reinstall it with these old ones for now. I'm probably going to pull all this stuff back off. I'm going to need to paint the brackets. I'm probably going to clean this up a lot better. And then at that point I can put these new bolts in. No point using them until I need to. So as we saw before, bracket's going to go on something like this, I hope. And then that means this needs to come through clocked like this so that the reservoir is at the top-ish. For reinstalling, I figure I'll probably have to go back over to the Vise, but I just want to figure out all the instructions now. Okay, so that one's removing, so this is going to be installing. Okay, so I'm going to have a installer screw going into the shaft. Okay, so I've got an assortment here. Let's use, say, this one, I guess. Really don't know what I'm doing. But okay, so lubricate jack screw with a light coating of oil and install into pulley A. We've already got that. Alright, so this is okay, so this clocked a bit. I don't know how well you can see that, but this, when it was getting pulled off, it kind of jacked itself over. So these pulleys are kind of stuck. Let's grab a hammer. Okay. Beauty. And the inside of this is kind of tweaked as well. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not too worried about it. Leave it. Okay, so that's threaded in there. That is obviously going to go like that. Okay, so then thread small end. Okay, so it says thread small end of appropriate screw installer into jack screw until hand tight. So obviously this is the small end. So this is saying screw the small end into the jack screw. Slide bearing over jack screw next to puller body A, followed by thrust washer. So this is our bearing. It's kind of a cheap pile of junk, and I might actually look at replacing this with a different bearing. It says put the bearing there, followed by the thrust washer. thrust washer helps protect the bearing. Sure. Thread the end of the appropriate screw installer into pump shaft until it bottoms out. Okay. And then hold jack screw with a 1/2 inch wrench while spinning this guy until it is seated. Okay. Yeah, I think that's about as good as she's gonna get. So, I think the thrust washer was supposed to go here, but I think this bearing was supposed to go the other way around. So the flat was to the body, and then the bearing was on the thrust washer. Whatever, it worked. Pulley's installed. Power steering pump is ready to go.